as long as we have the runway built with solidarity and we can hold out in negotiations and demand more, there's really no limit to what we can achieve with these community benefits agreements, no matter where the employer is.
Are you on? Which side are you on?
Will Tucker is the director for the Jobs to Move America's Southern program. He's got nearly a decade of experience as a journalist in Alabama and Washington, D.C. His expertise lies in filing public records requests and digging through data. Previously, he worked for the Southern Poverty Law Center as an investigative reporter covering criminal justice, focusing on prisons and work release. I guess I'll ask him if he was part of the union campaign there. Before that, in Washington, D.C., he covered congressional ethics and money and politics for the Houston Chronicle and OpenSecrets.org. Their reports under his byline led to 2 ethics committee investigations in the House of Representatives involving misconduct by 11 members of Congress and the federal conviction of a former congressman on nearly 24 corruption charges. Wow, Will, thank you for joining the Valley Labor Report.
Hey, y'all, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So I see here that you that you worked for the Southern Poverty Law Center. Were you there during the union campaign a few years ago?
I did, and I was, and happily signed a card. And yeah, it was a really formative experience for me, actually, on my path into kind of the labor movement work.
Awesome. Yeah, we were really excited to see that campaign. We had the honor of talking to a few of the people in the union, both during the union campaign and since then. So really appreciate their work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Could you just start by, with that in mind, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your story, particularly as it relates, to labor and the working class movement?
Yeah, of course. So, you mentioned in my intro that I used to be a journalist, an investigative reporter, and really the short answer to how I got into the work that we're doing today with Jobs to Move America. I did an investigation into a death at a poultry plant in 2018. It was the death of a man named Frank Ellington, who had been in the prison work release program. So he was, incarcerated, but was basically bused to and from this poultry plant in Ashland, Alabama, every day to work there. Just pretty horrific conditions in poultry plants, as I'm sure that y'all have talked about or at least aware of. Even to this day, I mean, there was a death of a young man in Mississippi.
Right. Yeah, we were talking about that just earlier this morning. Yeah.
Yeah, poultry plant in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. But so I did this I investigated this death and how it came to be that a man was put in such a dangerous position, and just got really interested in all of these issues, like kind of attendant issues to that. So this was a union facility, so it's an RWDSU represented facility, or plant rather. But I got really interested in the ways that companies, particularly in the South and particularly in the rural South, are cracking their workforces and diluting the power of unions by seeking out and receiving, in many cases, assists from the state in obtaining workers who are more vulnerable, workers who can't fight back, workers who are prevented one way or another from joining the union. So I got really interested in those issues, and that kind of set me off on this path where, I wanted to use my investigative reporting skills kind of on behalf of or in solidarity with the labor movement. And that led me to Jobs to Move America. So that's how I got to where I am today.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think you're touching on something that we talk about a lot on this show, which is some of the unique ways that the South is just hyper exploited in the ways in which unions are just really combated every step of the way here in the South. So tell us about Jobs to Move America. What kind of work do y'all do? What is JMA, and what are y'all up to?
Yeah, sure. So Jobs to Move America we're a nonprofit strategic policy and campaigns center. We've got offices in California, Illinois, New York, and the South, so around Birmingham and Jackson, Mississippi. We've got personnel in all those places. And when I say strategic campaigns and policy centers, basically what I mean is that, our purpose is to advocate for policies in the purchasing regions of this country, so the places that buy a lot of goods that are manufactured in places like the South. And so we focus on procurement policies in those areas, like in Los Angeles and in New York City and Chicago. We try to influence the purchasing policies, the procurement policies in those places, and add to those procedures, standards for the jobs that are created and sustained by the purchasing of those cities. So to give you an example, when electric buses are manufactured in Alabama, they're purchased by oftentimes, places like LA Metro. Thanks to Jobs to Move America's work, LA Metro has adopted a series of standards for job quality that manufacturers of electric buses need to abide by in order to get a leg up in the RFP process, get a leg up in the procurement process. They get awarded extra points for showing that they have lived up to certain salary and job benefits. And so, the quickest way to get those standards met is to unionize your facility. And so we use these policies that we achieve in places like LA and New York City to really advocate in the South in particular on behalf of workers.
Yeah, and one of the things that is a big part of the work that y'all do is community benefits agreements. So I was wondering if you could, tell us a little bit about, what are CBAs in general, how do they happen, and why are they a good thing for the labor movement?
Yeah, of course. So a community benefits agreement is a private contract between an employer and often a coalition of community groups, which includes labor, but it can also include, social justice organizations and immigrant rights organizations. Folks like in Alabama, we have a coalition for community benefits that includes the state chapter of the NAACP, Greater Birmingham Ministries, which is a faith-based direct services organization based out of Birmingham, Alabama Arise, which is a research-focused research and advocacy nonprofit in Montgomery, and several other organizations. I think we're up to nearly 20 to 24 organizations that are in and around and in solidarity with our coalition here. But so the community benefits agreement, the coalition comes together and sits on one side of the table, negotiates across the table with a company, a manufacturer. And what we can achieve through this agreement are these kinds of job standards, equity measures, and provisions in the community benefit agreement that address specific problems to the community where the manufacturing plant lies, or sits. And so a community benefits agreement can really can actually transform a local economy. It can transform a local community by changing the practices of one of the largest employers in the area. And so some examples of these agreements that Jobs to Move America and our community coalitions have negotiated before are in the electric bus industry, like I mentioned earlier. So we've got, successful community benefits agreements with BYD, which is a bus manufacturer, electric bus manufacturer out in California. Importantly for this audience and for us here, a community benefits agreement with New Flyer, which is a bus manufacturer in Anniston, Alabama. And this is, important because even within a community benefits agreement, it's important for labor because, one of the things that you can really get the community behind and achieve in a community benefits agreement is, you can achieve favorable agreements and provisions with the company that really level the playing field for workers who want to organize. And that's what we've been able to do at BYD, Proterra, another bus manufacturer, and at New Flyer as well. We also focused at JMA in the past on the railcar industry, so railcar manufacturing, and we have community benefits agreements with companies like CRRC and Incusario, which manufacture the rail cars that are purchased by metro transit agencies across the country.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating to be able to use something that seems kind of obscure, right? Like procurement policies of various metros, right? That doesn't exactly excite the average person probably, but it's a way in which we can actually make real material impacts on people's lives and actually improve people's lives at work. And so that's a really big deal. So I'm interested to hear a little bit more about the CBA, the Community Benefits Agreement with New Flyer in Anniston. Could you tell us a little bit what's involved with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can just go into looking at some of the provisions. One of the most important provisions, kind of an equity, race and class equity provision, is a series of targeted hiring goals. And so through negotiations last year, New Flyer agreed to hire 45% of all new hires from historically disadvantaged groups. So these were defined as groups who had traditionally been blocked from jobs in the manufacturing industry and in green tech manufacturing in particular. And so, historically disadvantaged groups as defined by the agreement includes Black workers, it includes LGBTQ folks, it includes women, and really, really importantly, folks who have been caught up in the criminal punishment system, which is important in Alabama because of the high degree of over-policing and over-criminalization in the state that prevents so many people from getting jobs. So we've got those targeted hiring provisions. We've got things in there like, again, on the issue with folks who are systems impacted by the criminal punishment system. We achieved a ban the box provision. So New Flyer will not will not conduct a background check on any worker before a conditional offer of employment is made, which is a really important criminal justice reform that we were able to bring to Alabama through the Community Benefits Agreement. Don't know that that could have been achieved in this state in any other way. We've got other training is another huge section. So of the Community Benefits Agreement. So New Flyer agreed to institute a new technical training initiative. They're adopting an electrical apprenticeship program. They also agreed to tie that electrical apprenticeship program to a pre-apprenticeship program that Jobs to Move America is putting together right now. And you can kind of see how this creates a pathway for potential employees at that plant. So the aperture of who can be, who the company lets in the door is opened up, and they are, being really intentional about hiring people from historically disadvantaged groups. We've removed some of those barriers again for, for example, the barriers against systems impacted folks. And then once they're in the door at the plant, we've got a system, we will have soon a system in place where those folks are supported and given the training that they need to succeed in the workplace, even if they have never stepped foot in a manufacturing setting before, which is really important. And also, that the impact of a research on the impact of an apprenticeship program. I'm sure I don't need to tell this audience this because it's intuitive, but the research on this as well was kind of staggering. The ability, if you're able to get into a rigorous apprenticeship program, the lifetime earnings that you're potentially going to be bringing in are pretty staggering. And of course, that's another reason why it's important to remain in really strong solidarity with our union brothers and sisters who have built out that apprenticeship system over the years. So there's a bunch of other provisions in the community benefits agreement with New Flyer. One other one I'll mention right now is a alternative complaint system that essentially gives workers a way to address racial discrimination and sexual harassment claims that provides them with an advocate even within the company's internal processes. And this, can be an empowering thing for workers who would otherwise feel like they can't bring up the issue for fear of retaliation, perhaps. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Having an outside advocate, having an outside procedure, and just knowing that there are other folks kind of watching, that certainly helps. I think these community benefit agreements are really an important way that we can rethink and reshape all this so-called, economic development that we hear a lot from politicians about. They love that phrase, economic development. But I think using the community benefits agreements, we can really leverage state power and state money to uplift everyday people and lift the standards in our workplaces. And to accomplish these CBAs, obviously, we need buy-in from some pretty different groups, right? Starting with the workers themselves, the labor unions that may be involved, community allies and coalition partners, and as you mentioned earlier, ultimately, at least on some level, public officials and business interests, right, have to be bought into this. So talk to us about some of the different and overlapping messages that you kind of have for these different constituencies who all are impacted by an agreement like this.
Sure. Well, first off, I've started when explaining, what we can achieve in a community benefits agreement to someone who's never heard it before. I've started kind of using this, just centering on solidarity. So what a community coalition can achieve in a community benefits agreement, or any kind of contract for that matter, comes down to the degree of solidarity that you can achieve. It's directly proportional to the solidarity, because that's where community power comes from. It comes from solidarity. So to give you an example, when we were negotiating this agreement with New Flyer, our community coalition, which also included the communication workers and CWA and the steel workers. And then at one point, the company thought that they might be able to negotiate with just the unions. At another point, they thought they might just be able to negotiate with just the community groups. And throughout the negotiations, we always said, no, if you're going to negotiate with one of us, you negotiate with all of us. So that level of solidarity gave us the runway, gave us the strength and the power to, get the best agreement possible. And I think that's really just the name of the game, is developing unshakable solidarity between labor and community groups to achieve, the best agreement possible. So I think another thing too is, and to Adam, to your point, we do need to have, local business entities bought into these, agreements. Certainly New Flyer, for example, has to be bought into it, and they are, and they're, a good partner for us. And, they're achieving really remarkable things actually under the agreement. But another important part here is that with a community benefits agreement, we can circumvent the systems that keep labor and community groups down, often in the state of Alabama in particular. So I'm thinking of the issue of preemption. So when the city of Birmingham tries to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, several years ago, the state legislature jumps in and says, no, you can't do that, and preempts the local ordinance.
Right.
Our agreement is a private agreement between a coalition of community-based organizations and unions, and so there's nothing to preempt there. So this is why it's important that we seek things like the ban the box provision that I mentioned earlier. Things that would be preempted otherwise. So it's an avenue for exercising power that gets us out from under the blocks against that power in the state as well. And again, that just means as long as we have the runway that's built with solidarity and we can hold out in negotiations and demand more, there's really no limit to what we can achieve with these community benefits agreements, no matter where the employer is. And then, of course, once the agreement is signed, that's when we become, it's when we get in partnership with the company itself. And a really key part of that is a system of accountability. So a community benefits agreement is a real community benefits agreement is governed by a system of private arbitration. So binding private arbitration. So, our commitments to one another as partners, the community groups, unions, and the employer are enforceable. The
Right.
promises that the company makes are enforceable, which is an important aspect of this as well.
Right, absolutely. There's actually, strings attached. And right, that's always been my biggest beef with the way we do economic development here in the South and in Alabama is, the no strings attached subsidies and incentives, and or you see celebrations of companies relocating to Alabama or coming to Alabama and expanding here. But there's never any discussion about, well, what kind of wages are they going to pay these people? How many are actually full-time versus part-time? What kind of benefits are going to be provided? What's this company's record when it comes to the environment? What's their company's record when it comes to, formerly incarcerated workers, or when it comes to labor unions? Are they a vicious union-busting kind of company, right? Is that who is benefiting? And so those are all, to me, factors that are really, that make this important, this community benefits agreement. And to your point, you're able to accomplish things that, if we're being realistic, are not going to make it through the Alabama legislature in the year 2023, right? And so some of the things that you can get with this organizing power and bringing in the workers in the community together is really pretty cool. I mean, considering the tough uphill battle we have politically and legislatively. And so that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, if someone is listening and thinks, wow, this is really cool. That's great. I'd like to see that in, my hometown, in Athens or in Decatur or Florence or wherever. What's your message to them about doing this and trying to secure a community benefits agreement in their community?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is to think about, I think the first thing to think about is, what are your community assets? What community assets are you plugged into? And by community assets, I mean, do you go to church? Does that church have a van that could participate in a workforce equity program and helping people without transportation get to work, as they're kind of starting out in a new job? But more importantly, think about, if you go to church or if you're part of a grassroots community organization, how can you reach out to labor and start building those bonds of solidarity organically, not necessarily between some, statewide coalition like ours, although, you'd be more than welcome to join our coalition meetings. think about how you can build those organic bonds in your own community between labor and the community groups that, you can open the door at. So places where you can invite labor in, invite in, a local business manager, invite in a local organizer. There are campaigns going on all over the place. And if, it doesn't have to be your union, it doesn't have to be, it can just be whatever is going on in your community. If you've got your ear to the ground and you know of workers who want to organize, connect them with the community organizations, or again, churches or schools or whatever that you have access to, and start building those bonds. So that's the very, very first thing. And then I think, look at one thing that kind of ties all of my work together personally, and then also, I think that we're doing a really good job at Jobs to Move America's Southern program right now on the research side, is look at where the most oppressed workers are in your community and figure out how to build those bonds of real community with them. So, how that can be done. Whether that's folks who have been incarcerated, folks who are under some kind of state supervision, whether those are undocumented immigrants in your community, or anybody else, LGBTQ workers, figure out who those folks are, and start building community intentionally with them. Don't have an objective at the beginning, but become part of be in community. In the organizing, that I've participated in the past, we use this phrase like, we can move at the speed of trust. And so we've got to build trust, and the more trust we have, the faster and better we can move with each other. And so that, I think, we need all over the state, all over Alabama, all over Mississippi, all the time. We got to for those,
and not just for community benefits agreements, but just in general to build our power as everyday people. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think
community.
I wouldn't close the door to community benefits agreements, but it's that solidarity that makes the real community benefits agreement powerful. So, if you want to be thinking, just think about the day when you can bring together, your own local coalition of community groups, to the doors of a factory and tell them, you need to listen to us, and you need to sit down and negotiate an agreement with us that resolves these problems for, these workers, these members of our community. And here's how you do that. So, this can happen organically all over. But it can also, there's something to be said also for kind of learning the process and the rhythms of campaigns. And for that, engage with Jobs to Move America, engage with our coalition. We're, gearing up for more campaigns in the very near future, and would love to have your support. And, many hands make light work. So the more hands we have, the more better work we can do.
Absolutely, yeah, and there's some big projects happening all over the South, and even more big projects to come. And I think those are all opportunities for us to organize and to get some concessions out of these big projects, and to get some guarantees, and to raise the standard for working people here in the South. Because for far too long, the South has been an escape for companies. Trying to escape unions, trying to escape environmental regulations, trying to escape any sort of protections regarding race or gender. So it's really important here in the South that we are working together to build agreements such as this, but also as you said, just to have that solidarity that makes agreements like this possible. So, Will, was there anything else that we missed that you wanted to share about either community benefits agreements, or just in general what Jobs to Move America is doing?
Yeah, I think we've just got really exciting things coming down the pike at JMA over the next few months. Some campaigns that we want to launch. some research that we're going to be launching. We want, a little bit of exposure for and attention on, and so just stay tuned. If you want to connect with JMA, just go to our website. It's jobstomoveamerica.org, jobstomoveamerica.org. At the top right, there is a stay connected. That'll get you on our listserv, or sign up for our email updates, and that's probably the best and quickest way to stay up to date with what we're doing, especially in the South.
Absolutely. Well, Will, thank you so much. I know y'all have a lot of really great work that is in the works, some of which you can't talk about yet, but hopefully you'll be able to come back on the program and as well as your team and share some of this good work, and especially some of the research you're talking about once it's time to go public. Would definitely love to cover that. So really appreciate all your work, Will, and thanks for joining the program.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Appreciate you having me. Y'all got a great show. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a good one, man.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.